Good evening and welcome to the RTM committee presentations on Monday, May 21st. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then please remain standing. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, who serves on our Board of Education, her father recently passed away. I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. In case anyone's here for public comment, we don't receive public comment in the committee presentations. After the committees break out into their subcommittees, public comments at the discretion of the chair, just in case anyone's here for public comment. We'll start with the appointments to the Roger Sherman Elementary School Building Committee, and the first one is Patrice Klien. So please come forward, sit at the table. You can sit at the table with your microphone and introduce yourself and just very briefly tell us about your background.
Hello. Hi. Hello, I'm Patrice Klien. I've been a resident all my life, some 50 plus years. My son went to Roger Sherman School. I went to Holland Hill, all perfect public schools. I'm volunteering on the Roger Sherman School Building Committee because I've been a school nurse for 17 years, been in and outside of both of these buildings, of all of these buildings. Feel like I am current and up to date on what's valuable to our children as far as gaining a good education in a well environment.
Thank you. Do any members of the body have any questions for this appointee? Seeing none, thank you for coming. You don't have to come on the following Tuesday at a regular meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Eric Lang.
Hi.
Good evening.
I'm Eric Lang. I'm a resident of Fairfield for about 4.5 years now. My eldest son is in kindergarten at Roger Sherman, and I've got a daughter who will be following in about 2 years. I am a licensed architect in the state of Connecticut as well as New York. I am currently the managing director of a real estate development management firm in New York City. And I think I'd have a lot to contribute to the committee, as this is something I do on a daily basis for a living. So I'm excited to be able to contribute.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for this appointee? Representative Gerber.
Tell me if this is inappropriate, but I have a general comment, but about this committee. First of all, this looks like one of the strongest committees I ever recall seeing. We've got security experts, health experts, architects, construction, and I would, but also really heavy on Sherman parents, which I'm fine with that actually. But I was wondering if, while the Sherman parents with all this expertise, while you're working on this project, if you wouldn't take notes and consider maybe doing other building projects in the future, because typically we don't have, as far as I can recall, so many parents from a school on that building committee, but we have trouble, I believe, filling other building committees. So we're going to have one. It's probably, you can't do both at the same time, I wouldn't think, but we're going to have Mill Hill coming up and others in the future. And if maybe you could spread the word with your fellow committee members to try to think about in the broader sense and about other committees in the future.
Absolutely. That would be something I personally would be open to.
Further discussion on this appointment? Seeing none, thanks for coming. Again, you don't have to come on Tuesday. Thanks. Meredith McCormack.
Hi. My children are graduates of Sherman. We were there when the annex was put on. I was very involved in phase 2 of the project. And so even though my kids are out of the school, I'm excited that Phase 3 is happening, and I'm looking forward to seeing it through.
Any questions for this appointment? Seeing none, thanks for coming. Sorry, Jill Vergara, Representative Vergara.
I just wanted to thank you for volunteering, and I think it's so great to have this continuity of someone with knowledge of all these phases. I read the minutes from a Board of Finance meeting in 2011, and you had spoken, so thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thanks for coming. Again, you don't have to appear on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Brian Papini. Okay. I know Alex Plitsas he's away, so he's not going to be here tonight or next week. So move to Richard Speciale.
Good evening, everybody. I have been a building chairman since 2007 on various projects, including Roger Sherman School. The latest one that I was on was the Penfield Building Committee. I am the director of the Engineering Testing Construction Laboratory. As I indicated, I'm looking forward to working on this one because I'd love to see Sherman completed.
Thank you. Any discussion from the body? Seeing none, thanks for coming. Again, you don't have to appear on Tuesday. Jenna Trotzer.
Hi, sorry I'm a little late. I had the wrong address.
Right, all right.
I am a Fairfield resident, new as of 2 years ago. I have been working in the architecture industry now for 20 years as both a project architect and project manager. But I'm coming to this really as a parent of Sherman and deeply involved in the PTA with an understanding of what they need and also trying to help them understand what is needed as far as the town goes. Because I understand the industry and how things work as far as budgets and schedules and so forth. So I hope I can help.
Thank you. Any discussion from the body? Any questions? Representative Herron, sorry.
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Gerber was saying about hoping that you'll also contribute in other ways, possibly. Normally, I'd be a little concerned. I'm a former Sherman parent myself, so I love that we have so many Sherman volunteers. I was just a little concerned when I read that 4 out of them currently have young children at Sherman, and 1 is a former Sherman parent, and it's just heavy Sherman, which I love because I'm a Sherman volunteer as well, but just I'm not as concerned for this because there's a cap, but I just want to keep that in mind that I'm not used to seeing building committees this heavily with such a vested interest for what it's the building committee. Thanks.
Further discussion or questions from the body? Seeing none, thank you for coming. You don't have to appear on Tuesday. Next, we'll hear an update from the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee.
Good evening. My name is Craig Curley, chairman of the H. Smith Richardson Building Committee. Tonight I have with me Hal Schwartz, who's the vice chair of the building committee as well. We've met with this body in the past, and we mentioned at our last visit that we would come back periodically and make sure that we kept this body informed of the progress that our building committee was making. And based on the progress we've made, this is an appropriate time to come and give you that update. Generally speaking, I'm going to take you through some of the items, but before we got started into more general terms, Hal's going to take you through some of our budget and financial numbers as it relates to the $250,000 that was a portion to the committee.
Good evening. Just as you all are aware that this body and the other bodies granted us seed money of $250,000. With that money, we were to get our architects signed on and ready to go. We also were the test case for our owner's rep. So Colliers was on board with our committee from the first day, which made our budget extremely tight. We've been working with Colliers as well as with the architect firms and everybody else And we right now have a budget of $250,000 and an expenditure line that would expend obviously no more than $250,000. We are at the point right now where we start meeting with our architects for the next 2 nights. We're going to meet with 4 architects. We had 4 firms bid with us, and the 4 firms that we're looking at are, while all of them are slightly over the budgeted number that we had for architects, we're pretty sure that we can get that number to come in. So we did want to let you know that the money end of this right now is tight, but we are working with all our partners. We foresee no issues coming in with that number when we're ready to go, come before you with the full bid.
We
Ready
can
for
pause there in
questions?
case there are questions about
All right,
the
Representative
the
Georgiadis.
Hi, Drew Georgiadis. Can't even say my own last name. Drew Georgiadis, District 9. For the architects, I know previously you had said you were looking at either rebuilding on the same location or in a different location. Are these architectural firms giving you plans for both options? All of them giving you 2 options?
Well, actually, all of them are going to, we're actually going to be asking, once we have a firm that we're going to go with, we're going to be asking for 4 options. We've budgeted for 4 separate options, and those options are, well, I'm sure you've probably heard and seen. One is a renovation. The other one is to put the building in the same approximate location. Option number 3 is up the hill, and option number 4 is a surprise us. So all 4 firms are aware of that. We're expecting some kind of presentations over the next couple of days from the firms, and then a week from Wednesday, we will make a decision on a firm.
Okay, 4 options sounds good. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. May?
Yes, I see in your description of one of your options, you wanted to put the restaurant on the 2nd floor of the building. It has to be available, handicapped available. How do you propose to resolve that?
well, obviously, any plan that we ask the architect to prepare would be compliant with ADA and all the necessary regulations.
Right.
The idea, certainly we are trying to resist the temptation of the building committee getting into the design specifically, but we're suggesting to the architects to consider certain options and things that would be important. One of the things that we talked about in a way of increasing the amount of optionality for the limited square footage of the space is to shrink the footprint of the building and to stack. And of course, that would mean an elevator or something like that.
The cost of an elevator, it's so expensive that I can't even imagine. We could put a whole other addition on for the price of that elevator.
If that's what, if the numbers come in and it proves to be cost prohibitive, it's not something that our building committee
Yeah,
would
that was a concern.
recommend.
Thank you.
Representative Herron?
Hi, I'm not sure, was your presentation finished, or we're just,
No, we're
With the
pausing
budget
to get in. There's a lot more that we can get
Okay.
into, but wanted to
because
pause for the
I can hold it then if they were still, it wasn't
Yeah.
about, it was more about the project summary, so
Yeah,
would you like?
let's let the presentation continue for now.
So, as Hal mentioned, we've gone out with an RFP to the various architectural firms. We had 16 different firms come and visit, do a site tour to see if there was interest in actually providing a bid. We received 8 formal bids from 8 different firms, and then the building committee ranked those firms through a fairly rigorous process. Both, we started without considering the financial aspects of their bid, specifically their fees, just on their merits, including things like their experience with our golf courses, their experience working with municipalities, whether it's a minority or a small business-owned firm. There was a matrix and grid that we went through to score each bid. The building committee met, narrowed that field of 8 to 4, and as Hal mentioned, we've invited those 4 firms to provide presentations to the building committee tomorrow night and Wednesday night, 2 per night. After that process, we will meet in a week's time to select one of those 4 firms to move forward. In terms of their actual fee quotes, each firm was asked to provide a quote based on each of the 4 options that they asked us, that we asked them to consider. And those fees will vary, primarily because a renovation is expected to cost less. Moving up to the top of the hill is likely to cost more. And they gave us different quotes for the different options that we asked them to consider. We managed the building committee decided to manage the potential fees of the architects by not asking for full-blown schematic designs for each of the 4 options, but instead to do conceptual designs. That will take us through the design development phase. So that was a step we took, really not needing to get into the details until we actually hone it down. One thing that I think is important for this for this committee to understand, 2 things come to mind. Before the building committee wrote its RFP, which was fairly detailed, I think it was 16 or 17 pages, we really took some time to brainstorm and really understand what it was that we were asking for, meeting all of the needs that were put forth to us and suggestions that were made. We reached out to the various clubs, the Golf Pro, and certainly some of the suggestions that came out of this body as well were incorporated, like making sure that to the extent that there's lockers for golf bag storage, that it was available on a unisex basis, and that there was equal and fair treatment and accessibility. So provided in the documents that we gave to this committee for tonight's meeting was that 4-page summary. That really was the backbone and what was used to form the RFP, and I think that was really helpful for our committee to go through that extra step of putting in layman's terms what exactly we were looking for. And then the second thing that I think is important to understand is that the building committee is not asking for or is really keeping an open mind about keeping all options on the table and considering them equally and fairly. One of the options that did come out of our discussions, and it's important for everyone here to be aware of it, is that not only are we considering a renovation in place and a replacement in the near vicinity, but we're also considering the opposite side of the property. And there are a lot of benefits that come out of that option, so we thought it was important to explore it. There are certainly some potential downsides to that as well, and as a committee we will weigh those pros and cons, and if there are any discussions or questions that you have about that option, I'd love to have that discussion this evening as well. But some of the potential benefits of moving up to the top of the hill is that during construction, the existing facility would be left intact, so it would have virtually no impact on the golf operations through the construction phase. Another option is that the clubhouse, if it's sharing a parking lot with the driving range, is projected to double or triple or more the range revenue that the town generates each year. Each year right now, the driving range generates about $150,000. That could easily be $300,000 to $500,000 if the parking lot was shared between the driving range and the clubhouse and the main building. Now, just back of the envelope math, $75,000 of additional revenue will likely cover about $1 million of project cost. So I'm not saying that we should consider anything that is any more expensive than it needs to be, but if moving up to the top of the hill is $1 million more, it's more than likely more than paid for by the incremental revenue that's expected. So that's another benefit. Third benefit is a lot of what we heard here at the last time we were at this in this meeting was that we really needed to be mindful of and consider non-golf amenities for non-golfers. Now, the charge that we received from the Board of Selectmen was very clear. The golf operations needed to be the priority. We needed to keep our options open for potential future development, but not necessarily plan to spend that money with this project. And I think we can dovetail those things potentially by considering moving up to the top of the hill, because as I think everyone's aware, the Parks and Rec has roughly 13 acres of property adjacent to the driving range and where the current Bldg Yellow softball field is. Now, the town can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, at whatever pace it wants, but if the clubhouse and parking lot is placed there, it certainly gives the town a lot of options to consider it whenever they're ready. So with that, I can also take you through some of our current schedule, and then we can open it up to questions. As I mentioned, we've got the interviews with the architects coming up in the next couple of days. We're going to be selecting the architect next week. And then at the very back of your package, we provided more of a long-term map or calendar of the project. And really, if we keep everything on schedule, we're not going to be breaking ground on this project until probably Labor Day of next year. So that we recognize that there are a lot of steps that need to occur, including all the approvals and then all the construction-related testing of lots of different things along the way. So, Hal, did you have anything before we open it up for questions?
No, I'm ready.
Okay.
Questions from members of the body? Representative Lopez.
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. I was just wondering if you could walk me through what you're talking about moving to the top of the hill, because I'm very familiar with Bldg Yellow. I spent a lot of time there.
Sure.
So are you talking about moving, because the parking lot is shared there between the driving range and the softball field. Would the parking stay there if you're talking about moving the building up? Like, how would that work?
Right. So, excellent question. Again, our Colliers, our owner's rep, has cautioned the building committee to not plan and let the architects plan.
Exactly.
But I can share what we've generally envisioned, and that is on the south side of Hoyden's Lane, so across the street from the driving range, across the street from the softball field, as you drive up in that direction, there's a maintenance shed.
Yeah.
That maintenance shed is likely the footprint of where the new clubhouse would be. Now, there's not enough room to put a parking lot on the same south side of Hoyden's Lane. So I think what we've considered and thought was likely would be that the couple of acres of property that from Hoyden's Hill Lane, the long drive into the driving range, that would be your parking lot.
Got it. Yeah, I think any improvement to that parking area would be great, because it's not great right now.
Yeah, so now, as it's currently designed, the parking lot is sufficient for the softball traffic and the driving range traffic. Spoken with Anthony Calabrese at Parks and Rec about it. The choke point for the softball field is really opening day, when every team is there at the same time. But certainly, if there was a parking lot that was expanded so that the golf parking lot was also there, it would more than be able to accommodate what the town needs.
Further questions? Representative Ambrose.
Good evening, yes. Peter Ambrose, District 1. One of the concerns I have, Craig, in this concept of putting the clubhouse at the top of the hill is the issue of safety on Hoyden's Hill Road and Hoyden's Hill Lane. It's a very curvy, a very narrow road, and I as I said to you when I came in tonight, that, you know, the worst thing is golfers who are late for a tee time, and you could see them speeding up that hill, and that's a real safety issue, I think. And I believe you're going to look into the safety considerations with the police department as to traffic studies up there, and because I That's a huge concern I would have. So let it be said that I'd be concerned about that.
And that's an excellent point. It's certainly something that the building committee has considered. I think, generally speaking, for those who are familiar with the softball softball field approval, there was a lot of concern about, there were two ways that traffic could possibly flow, right? And if you travel on Morehouse up to Hoyden's Lane, that's not nearly as dangerous. Certainly is narrow, but not nearly as dangerous. And I think we've had some informal conversations with the police department. We would get into more formal conversations about that and take any necessary steps to consider the traffic or safety. And at any point, if we get an indication that it's not the right path forward, the building committee is not going to push forward with it. I think it's really important the important point to make tonight is that we can spend a little time talking about this option 3 that we've put forward because it's a new concept and everyone's curious about it, and that's fine, but we really are exploring that with no prejudice or inclination. We're not giving one option any more favor than any of the other options.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Just add one point to that. The building committee has done some pre-due diligence on this. We've had conversations with people in the town, with the police department, with other town bodies, just to make sure that there was nothing that said don't do this. So we haven't got a stop from anybody yet in any of the discussions that we've had. Now, we haven't had formal discussions with everybody. The committee hasn't even come to that. We haven't even seen the layout yet. But at this point in time, it is as viable an option as the other ones. I know it makes a lot more noise than the other options do, and we are well aware of that. But that's a decision that we're all going to have to make probably a year from now, or maybe a little bit less. So, you know, we're a long way away from saying, okay, we're going to put the clubhouse up on Hoyden's Lane. But we have done a little bit of work behind to make sure that nobody's jumping up and down and saying you can't do this. Nobody said you can't. A lot of people said you probably shouldn't, but we'll take it one step at a time.
Further questions? Representative Herron?
Doreen Herron, District 9. I just had a few, I think, easy questions. I was shocked to see the snack shack and practice greens included in the summary. In my mind, I would think they'd be add-ons or at a later stage because I didn't think that was part of the charge, but maybe I was wrong how that would be included in that.
Well, I think the charge was pretty clear that we needed to prioritize for the golf operations. And to the extent that we are, right now there are 3 very small practice greens spread across on 3 different sides of the building as it currently sits. It's very clear that if there's any type of construction, those are going to get demolished or taken out at just by virtue of it being a construction site. So it's going to have to be rebuilt, and it doesn't make sense to have 3 small ones. You should have 1 normal size one, and that actually will take up less square footage than what we are currently using. As far as the snack shack, I don't think that would be cost prohibitive, but certainly if that add-on is cost prohibitive, we would consider that. I think the expectation is that right now, the way the golf course is set up, and certainly if the building were stacked so that the restaurant were on the 2nd floor, we would need some service for the golfers on the golf course. And the least expensive path to that would be a small shed so that it's in the right spot.
Thank you. I just had one other question. It was just the wording in the summary that it threw me a little bit, is that the pro shop should be located in close proximity to and view of the first tee. And for me, I think that would be great. I just wouldn't want to spend any additional money to make that happen. So maybe you could just explain to me why that's in there.
Well, sure. Whether it's a renovation or a rebuild, I think optimizing and making the floor plan more efficient is certainly something that we should be doing. And being smart about where the kitchen is placed and being smart where the pro shop is placed and being smart as to how the layout of the footprint is designed is just something that we would
So it's just
wanna
more when you go in, right out, you go golfing at the first. It's not for any other reasons than that?
It's for a couple of different reasons. One, it is typical and customary for the pro shop to overlook the first tee, really so that they can see when the customers arrive, they pay, they go to the first tee.
And is that how it is now?
No, right now they're in the wrong corner.
I guess my question is then, I could totally understand changing that if we were rebuilding, but my concern would be if we were renovating, to change that at an added cost would be a concern of mine.
Yeah, and again, we're always trying to resist the temptation to design. If the renovation suggestion from the architects were to leave the pro shop as is, and it would cost an extra $1 million to move it, it clearly would not make sense to move it.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative McDermott?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark McDermott, District 7. I just had one question about moving it up the hill, and to follow up with Representative Herron's question about viewing the first tee. I can't envision where this is going to be up the hill, so are you going to change the layout of the golf course as well? We're going to have a new first starting hole, and the whole golf course is going to be changed?
Well, yeah, clearly if the clubhouse were to be moved to the Hoydens Hill side of the property, the layout would change. I'm not sure how commonly known this is, but when the golf course was originally designed in 1970, the original site of the clubhouse was where the maintenance shed is now. So what we're actually considering is to return the original design back to its original intent. So if you're familiar with the golf course now, the two nines, the front nine and back nine, would stay intact, but they would flip-flop, so the front becomes the back becomes the front, and then they would be played in a slightly different order so that what's now the 11th hole would be your first hole. You'd come around and end on the 10th hole for your 9th hole. And then the future back nine would start on what is now the 7th hole and end on the 6th hole for 18.
I wouldn't mind not finishing on that 18th hole because it could ruin your entire day if you were playing well. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, but it would also be a great finishing hole if you're having a really good day, too.
Representative Gerber?
Hey, Craig and Hal. Bill Gerber, District 2. Thanks for coming. I was wondering if you could run us through the format that your numbers are going to look like. So, you know, you're going to have a year-by-year P&L for each option. You're going to have a net, payback period, a net present value, that sort of thing. Because that's what we saw, you know, for some other projects like Penfield. I would assume that it would be hard to make a decision without that. I mean, it might not necessarily be positive, but if it's negative, we need to know how negative.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to take a crack. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, based on what's going on right now, there is no ROI on a new clubhouse. If we leave the facility where it is, the only thing that we can promise you is it won't cost you as much money to maintain the clubhouse as it is right now. But we can't promise anybody any more revenue because the golf course is just about maxed out on rounds. We may get some more outings. We may get some more revenue from our concession vendor. But if the clubhouse stays where it is, and we told the Board of Finance the same thing, this is really just this is a building that needs to be replaced or renovated, and we're getting the cost now from Parks and Rec onto what it's costing to maintain the building as well as to maintain the cart barn. So
that actually, I'm sorry, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But you know, because there's a cost to maintaining what we currently have, and and there are, in terms of energy, all the negative things about maintenance and stuff like that. So that would be one scenario. Then there'd be another scenario that would be the potential additional revenues from the restaurant. If let's say you put it on the second floor and there's great views, and you could have, there'd be extra revenues. I mean, I think those things need to be.
Well, they are all possibilities, but we can't promise any of those, at least not at this point in time.
You can't.
But I can't promise you that the restaurant is going to do more business. We're not putting up a banquet facility. There will be no weddings or bar mitzvahs or parties up there. The Board of Selectmen was very, very clear about that. The clubhouse that we're looking at is enough to hold about 150 people, which would be a nice golf outing. A nice restaurant on Fridays and Saturdays, as it is right now, a little bit bigger. Yeah, there may be more revenue from a concessionaire, but right now our biggest savings is going to be the savings from the new building.
Do we have like a numbers person on this project? Yeah, because you have to make those P&Ls. I don't see how we could vote on it without that. Honestly, that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else disagrees, but you have to make assumptions. Like Penfield, for example, I think some of those assumptions were probably wrong, but they made the assumptions and we debated them ad infinitum in meetings, and then in the end we made the decision that the numbers made sense, and that with certain sensitivities around the numbers that we could live with the potential. If it was 3/4, that we could live with it. I think, if depending on the amount, but I think if you're going to be putting these options forward, it would be, at least personally, it would be very, very difficult for me to vote on something that didn't have at least some clear assumptions around it, like why are we putting this up on the hill, as opposed to it's just a really cool thing, a cool project.
Yeah, no, let me clarify. I think that the important. I think the important distinction about what you're asking for versus what Hal mentioned was that Hal's point is a valid one, that we can't promise certain things, but I do understand your point about assumptions.
It's
right?
like any investment. If you're putting a business together with your own money, you make assumptions. You might be wrong. I mean, here, if you're wrong, the implications are a little bit less dire to an individual who's putting their own money into it, but you have to make assumptions as to why you'd move the clubhouse, why you would change, what's the benefit, the added benefit in terms of, dollars or whatever, in terms of changing the layout to have the pro shop facing the first tee, because we're not paving all our streets here because we have budget problems. So, there has to be an argument laid out, and it's got to be in dollars, in my opinion. I don't know.
Right. So let me address that point, because I do understand the point, and I do expect that when we come forward with the plans, we will have at least pro formas and assumptions that go into that. So we are very close to the same page, and what I expect will happen is that in a renovation scenario, we're probably not going to change the number of rounds, as Hal pointed out, dramatically. We're not going to make any additional range revenue. Really, in a renovation scenario, pretty much the only thing that we'll be able to put forth in terms of how do we pay for this is how much savings do we have, because we're not having Department of Public Works go up there and repair the roof and repair the furnace, and the energy costs were, through the roof, literally.
And I would assume you have liability costs with the current structure that, maybe the insurance is higher, things like that would be considered. I think,
So I do think in a renovation scenario, the comparables are going to be how much savings does a renovation provide to the town, and how much does that help subsidize, right? If we were to tear down and rebuild, as Hal mentioned, now we can have a space that can accommodate more golf outings. So there's going to be some incremental revenue from that that's going to be probably not there in a renovation scenario, but probably would be there in a rebuild scenario. We also, I would expect that the contract with the concessionaire likely would be dramatically more in a rebuild versus a renovation. So I think that's
the type of thing you need to lay those assumptions out in P&L with projected, with some sensitivities around it. Thank you.
If we were to consider moving up the hill, I think that's where the incremental revenue from the range really helps to support that case. So I do expect that we'd have 3 different pro formas for each of the 3 different options.
Thanks, Greg.
Further discussion? Representative Vergara?
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. I totally agree with Representative Gerber. I want that P&L. I think looking at those numbers is very important for us. I appreciated that in this project summary, it seemed like you were weaving the interest of revenue generation, the consideration of revenue generation throughout. But I had this question, why wasn't it in as one of the objectives? And I kind of wanted to see revenue generation as one of the objectives. So I guess my question to you is, why wasn't it? And
Well, I think we probably could have been more clear. Again, that summary was the product that the building committee brainstormed and tried to put in layman's terms some of the thoughts that we had towards the project, and it was really used as a foundation for the RFP. So the intention and goal of that document was to really help build the request for proposals to the architect. I think to the extent that we were not wanting to disqualify the renovation as a consideration, we didn't focus on the revenue side of the equation at this stage, but clearly anything that we do, additional revenue would be something that would support the cost of the project, and I think we all understand that.
Further discussion? Representative Siebert?
Joe Siebert, District 5, in the spirit of revenue generation, and I happen to be an avid golfer, so if we can address Representative Ambrose's concerns about safety, which is very important, my personal opinion is that one of the drawbacks about Smith, and it's a golf course I love to play when I have the opportunity to actually get on the course, but the fact that you have to go elsewhere to hit a bucket of balls before you play your round, I can tell you, I belong to a private country club. The ability for golfers who love to play golf, to be able to hit a bucket of balls, show up an hour before their tee-off time, and then play their round, I think potentially could be a real revenue generator if we can address the safety issue that Representative Ambrose brought up, which I think is a valid concern that needs to be mitigated.
Yeah. I completely agree about the safety as being the priority, but I also understand the revenue side of the equation too. And as a point of reference, Ryan Scully, who's the chairman of the Golf Commission, did some research on this point. Spoke to the Golf Pro as well. I mentioned earlier that the town does about $150,000 a year in range revenue, and the expectation is that that would either double to triple, $300,000 to $500,000 a year. For that very point that Representative Siebert mentioned, that right now people have to get in their car and drive to the range and get in their car and drive back to hit a bucket of balls before they play, and because of that, most people don't. As a point of comparison, I believe Mr. Scully, the chairman of the Golf Commission, did some research and found that the revenue that Stamford generates at Sterling Farms, which has a driving range on the using the same parking lot as the golf course, is roughly $1 million a year. Now, I don't think we would ever want to assume in our pro formas that we would go from $150,000 to $1 million, but I think it does at least give an indication that clearly, to the extent that the golf course is using the same parking lot as the driving range and it's easy access where someone can hit balls before they play, that could go a long way towards paying for and subsidizing this project.
So this is a great discussion. I'm happy to let it continue. I just want to remind our members this is not a voting item, and we have 7 other items to discuss, and we've been at it for about 45 minutes. That being said, we can continue the discussion, and I'm happy to let it continue, but just remember that. Representative Herron.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up because it comes up a lot. If we were to do the rebuild, I hear that it would increase our revenue because we would attract more tournaments. My question is, if we're at the optimal rounds already, where is that assumption coming from that we would increase revenue?
Right. The ideal number of rounds at Smith is between 40 and 45,000 rounds per year. I think we've been hovering around 40,000 the last few years, and it is very weather dependent. And I offer that anecdotally because I was the chairman of the Golf Commission for 5 years, from 2009 to 2014. Tashawa Knolls and a number of the golf courses, Fairchild Wheeler, a number of the Sterling Farms, Oak Hills, a number of the golf courses in Fairfield County, the public golf courses, do host golf tournaments on Mondays, occasional Tuesdays. Most are doing 20 to 30 events per year. We're doing 2 to 3. So my guess is that if we were to, and if we look at the tee sheet, not necessarily in terms of total number of rounds, but if we look at the tee sheet on a per week basis, you know, what day's busy, what day's not, we could certainly accommodate tournaments on a Monday or a Tuesday and generate more revenue that way. Now, the golf course right now does have play on Mondays and Tuesdays from the Ladies Club, the Seniors Club, and to date, they each of those groups have moved their tournaments to Wednesdays or Thursdays, or their weekly events to Wednesdays and Thursdays, to allow the golf course to take advantage of that revenue opportunity. And I expect that would likely be the case going forward.
I guess just another, having served on Parks and Rec, I just want to caution that since we are at an optimal number of rounds now, and I'm assuming they're mainly residents, that they're not, so what's the ratio then?
So right now, and this is a long trend, right now there are about 40 to 45,000 rounds per year. Roughly 2/3 of those rounds come from residents and 1/3 come from non-residents. That's rule of thumb, round numbers, that's where we've been for the last
I guess I just would caution that to bring in tournaments could be in town or out of town. It's just that if they're already optimal rounds, we are serving the town in terms of golf. So I just don't want to not serve that need to generate revenue potentially. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm not sure I completely followed that. I think clearly the Golf Commission, their task, and I think they've done a very good job for the last 15, 20 years of balancing resident and non-resident play, because non-resident play acts to subsidize resident rates. And to the extent that there are additional revenues from tournaments, to the extent that it's not displacing residents, which I think may be the concern, I think those tournaments have to occur on the off-peak days, which is why Monday and Tuesdays would.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I have one quick.
Representative Walk.
Jay Walk, District 5. Just one quick question. I totally agree with Representative Ambrose about the safety of that road that is windy and it is not safe. Just a suggestion, speed bumps, might work. So just that would slow people down going up that hill. And but it is a dangerous curve going up. But I can fully understand Representative Siebert, Joe's point about putting the driving range near the clubhouse, which is a great idea. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thanks for coming. And everyone remember that their meetings are open to the public. You guys are meeting tomorrow and Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay, and we are still looking for a liaison from the RTM, notwithstanding all the discussion tonight. I have gotten some interest today, and so hopefully we'll give you a liaison soon. Thanks for coming. All right, next we have the interlocal recycling agreement. I just want the members to try to keep the side conversations to a minimum. There seems to be a lot of conversation tonight, and it's, I think, interfering with the presentations.
That's the weather, man.
Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Mike Zimbrewski, Director of Solid Waste and Recycling. I'm here tonight for the Greater Bridgeport Regional Recycling Interlocal Agreement. Basically, it's an agreement that replaces...
Mike, we can't hear you. You gotta speak that. Just talk a little closer.
It's on? Okay. Basically... How about now? Okay. Basically, the agreement replaces the original recycling agreement that was executed in 1989. It allows us to remain with 10 other towns and it'll allow us to execute contracts, renewal contracts, and RFPs for our recycling.
Is there any discussion on this item? Representative Gerber.
Hey, Mike. Bill Gerber, District 2. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
Just was wondering if you could comment. Recently, the last several months, there's been a lot of news on like China not accepting recycling, and that
Correct.
people can't get rid of their, because of the single stream, it's like stacking up in warehouses and stuff like that. So, and that tonnage costs, like tipping costs, are going up in some areas a lot. How does that impact us, or does it at all?
Well, I put the expense in my budget. And originally, in the past couple of years, we made a little over $200,000 on recycling revenue when the money was good. We entered into a contract, and we're looking at a few RFPs, and possibly when the recycling market rebounds, we will get revenue back. So it will rebound.
I mean, we don't have any is Bridgeport seeing this issue though with not being able to get rid of?
No, we're all part of the same group.
Right.
Bridgeport, all these other towns are in the same group. The marketer right now is Winter Brothers, and they're having a hard time getting rid of the materials.
And is the cost that you expect that cost to go up further, or is that sort of locked in?
Yes, it's the cost. We can lock it. Hopefully, we can lock it in for a year or two. But we will have quarterly meetings, from what I was told, to look at the prices of the recycling if and when it becomes profitable again.
I mean, do we have alternatives, or is this basically like?
Not really.
Right. Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Pastilli?
Sharon Pastilli, District 3. Mike, do you mind just letting the body know about some of the innovations that you've made over the last few years with, like obviously all these materials are backing up, but you've really done a lot to try to get specific items out of the waste stream. I was just wondering if you could tell us about that briefly.
Representative Pastilli, can you relate it to the agreement?
Oh. No. Okay, I'll withdraw my question.
Okay. Sorry. Further questions and comments? Representative Lopez?
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. You're saying that this is just a new agreement that we've been with all these towns. Is there anything significantly different than what we were entered into before?
No, there's not as many towns as there used to be. There's a lot of other towns separated, and they're actually paying more than we are.
Okay, so it's not good that for them.
For those other towns. A lot of towns wanted to get back with us, but we have a certain amount that we don't want to exceed for tonnage in towns and memberships.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Herron?
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. I just had a question in the agreement, number 7, it says arrangements for billing and payment of tipping fees. Is that gratuity, or is that a different terminology for recycling? So you can.
Tipping fees are what we would be paying for the materials to be shipped out to process the recyclables, or revenue would be a tip fee that we would receive if the
Thank you.
materials became
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Representative Bateson?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ed Bateson, District 1 now. Mike, quick thing. You mentioned that some municipalities have left this agreement. Is that something we explored looking into another interlocal, and you weren't happy with it? You decided to stay with this one?
No, we've always been with this group, and it's been probably less expensive. The other groups just wanted to get out because they weren't closer to us, like your Greenwiches, your Stanfords. There was more of the CRA. They wanted to leave the group because of the old CRA.
Okay. All right. So you did your due diligence to look elsewhere. This is where we want to be.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thanks for the presentation. Next, we have the Mill Hill bond resolution.
You can share with me, but mine aren't in order.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, thank you for this
evening.
opportunity. Tonight we want to talk to you about the Mill Hill Elementary School project team initial funding request of $1,500,000. Last month you should have gotten a fairly large booklet from Betsy Brown's office, which had Sherman in it and Mill Hill, so we didn't make more copies of that, but if this body needs copies, we do have a few extras.
And if members have not located their electronic copies, let me know and I can direct you to where they're located online.
Thank you. So the request, this request has been in the Board of Ed's facility plan for a very long time and in the waterfall schedule that goes before the town's financial capital summit. What we're asking for is $1.5 million for the Board of Selectmen to set up a building committee to look at Mill Hill Elementary School project, hire the team necessary to start looking at the site restrictions, environmental issues, architectural engineering, and to look at the enrollment, and to follow the Board of Ed's approved educational specification for a 504 school enrollment in the future. If you looked at your booklet, the current enrollment at Mill Hill is 347. A 10-year projection shows it peaking to 384. It's got 5 portable classrooms on that site. The school is old. It needs to be updated for building code, health code, life safety. More importantly, mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning, and to meet the needs of the staff and the students moving into the future. So I don't know how much you want me to go into about the details of the project, but if everyone has looked at the booklet we gave out, we answered the 14 questions for the town for the request. There's been an awful lot of meetings with the other town bodies, provided a lot of information. We've done a lot of work with our demographer since last year on the enrollment projections and options for that site and the need in the district for this school to be renovated.
Thank you. Questions from members of the body? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Tom, sorry, you just referenced 504. I just want to make certain that I understand this was kicked back and forth between the BOF and the BOS. I'm under the impression that the BOE is sticking with the 504, but the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, under this 1.5, want 3 scenarios returned, correct?
Correct.
So we're going to get, I'm going to say bids or plans for 3 population scenarios, correct?
I don't know if you'll get full bids and plans for all 3, but the project team under the building committee will look at a 378 enrollment, a 441 enrollment, and a 504 enrollment.
And at that point, I just want to iron out the presentation schedule. Once that is determined, then does it make another round of approvals? Let's say this comes back. I just want to make certain where this is going to go from here. We approve the seed money. If something changes when the appropriation comes back, then the main appropriation is going to get debated by all bodies, correct?
Correct. There'll be, the Board of Ed has approved a 504 and did an ed spec for a 504, so if that were to change, if a 441 or a 378 is looked at by the project team and building committee and brought to the Board of Selectmen, certainly the Board of Ed would have to redo the ed spec.
And that's the only body that can redo an ed spec, right?
Correct.
Is the Board of Ed.
Correct.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Further questions? Didn't see your hand. Representative Hurley.
Michael, excuse me, I'm sorry. Michael Hurley, RTM.
Yeah, why don't we? Careful with this one.
Is that working?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay, good. Michael Hurley, RTM, District 10. I live a few blocks from Mill Hill School, and one of the biggest concerns in Mill Hill, and I'm taking Greater Southport now, is just the traffic congestion we're dealing with, and the infrastructure around the school, the roads and such, really isn't sufficient to handle, in my opinion, and I think most of my constituents would agree, the current building footprint in the area. And we have an assisted living facility going in that's about, I think 296,000 square foot behind the school. And when you did the introduction, you outlined a number of things that you're considering. I just want to make sure that you're going to do a very, very serious and thorough traffic study. I'm not taking a position tonight on which size ultimately I think is the best for the town, but I do have to say that going all the way up to a 504 is going to result in even more traffic in an area that really can't take it, and you have a huge senior living facility that's going in behind the school. So it's not so much a question, it's more of a point that I want to emphasize to both you and to the superintendent of schools.
Yep, duly noted. Almost all of our schools have traffic issues for morning drop-off, afternoon pickup, and certainly large school events. But a traffic study will be done with the project team for that site. It'll have to be done because they're going to look at how many buses are arriving at what time, how many parents are driving.
And they're going to take in some forecasting related to the assisted living development, which was provided during the TP&Z hearings?
I can't tell you they're going to do that, but they should look at the surrounding areas and other construction work going on. Our demographers did also.
Thank you.
Further questions and discussion? Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. So the current functional capacity is listed as 378 without the portables, but that doesn't really take into consideration the small space deficiency, right? If that were taken into consideration, what is the capacity in that school?
Well, the capacity is based on classroom sizes and availability. The issue is the demographers worked with us to look at all our elementary schools, identify what was a good amount of small spaces required, especially for a 504, and they range between 17 and 24 small rooms. Mill Hill has 10, so that is an issue. The portable classrooms are an issue at that site. 2 of them are extremely old. And there are spaces inside the building that are taking full-size classrooms for other purposes. So all of that combined together is making it not work the way we'd like to see a 504 typical school in Fairfield work for the enrollment.
So even if we were to just do an ed spec for a 378, that would still mean that you would need to do an addition for that school, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Gerber.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with this revised wording for without prejudice. I mean, the B of E, obviously we are prejudiced, right? We want a 504. I think, Mr. Hurley, you want a 504 too, because you wrote a letter to the editor that you wanted a 504. But anyway,
Michael, you're out of order. You can speak once I recognize you.
The Republican Party very clearly wanted a 504 as well a couple years ago, and I think it's always been the standard, what we strive for in this town. But without prejudice, to me, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, means we prefer a 504 because the population of this town's growing, has grown significantly, and there's a lot of new construction. But there's a certain tipping point at which, a threshold at which the cost of the 504 is just not worth it. That's the way I've always looked at it. If there's ledge there, and the 504 is going to cost $5 million versus a 441, then the decision's one decision. If it's 500,000 more, it's another completely different decision. But that, all things being equal, we've always been striving for 504 in this town. I mean, and personally, I would not want you to sort of spend more than it makes sense per additional child. You know, that differential for kids, there's a cost at which it makes sense, and there's a cost at which it doesn't. So I'm assuming that's the way that the instructions that are going to be sort of given to the, I mean, the committee is going to have some instructions from somebody, right? Who do the instructions come from?
Well, first selectman will define the charge for the building committee.
I mean, would we ever do less? Let's say the two are equal in cost. Would we ever do less just because? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Bateson?
Yeah, I have to address Representative Gerber's comments. I, being one of the individuals that came out several years ago for a 504 facility, I did at that time. I think my personal feeling on this is that the BOE and us as members of the town have always dedicated ourselves to building or providing classrooms to where the kids are. And things have changed over the past several years, and I'm not seeing that right now. So there is a little trepidation on my part to revisit my 504 position. Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Hurley?
Michael Haley, oh, that's a powerful mic, RTM District 10. And I was the co-author of the piece by former RTM Majority Leader Ed Bateson. And, you know, times do change. Look, I remain open, you know, to hearing, you know, the BOE's plans and, you know, what makes sense. But at the same time, you know, sometimes the data does change. I'm very close with my constituents in the area. And I will say that, you know, people do have some concerns about putting in a very large school. They want a school that sort of fits in with the neighborhood. And I'm going to say it again, and I don't know how many times I have to say it. You know, traffic in the area is terrible. And what I'd like to see is the town to, you know, include some type, if you want to go with 504, and maybe that's the right thing to do, maybe it isn't. But if you're going to go with something so large and there truly is a need, then I do think that there needs to be some major upgrades, improvements to the roadways surrounding Mill Hill School. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none?
Thank
Thanks
you
for the
very much.
presentation. Next we have the Duck Farm Bridge bond resolution.
Good evening. I'm Bill Hurley, engineering manager for the town of Fairfield. And although the town and the consultant have agreed on scope of services and fee for the design of the Duck Farm Road Bridge, a policy change at the Connecticut DOT requires that the town and consultant agreement carry two 10% contingencies. Fairfield, DPW, and engineering are requesting additional funding for the bridge design. This will match the town consultant agreement with the state town agreement. The request is for $64,925. That will cover the potential contingencies and any extra work proposed by the consultant, which must be formally approved by the town and the state prior to commencement of any additional work. Please note that any of the $64,925 potential funding will be federally reimbursed at 80% of the approved expenditures as part of the federal local bridge program, thereby potentially costing the town up to an additional $12,985 for the extreme or worst case scenario. I believe all and the backup information should have been included in your packets. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the body? Representative Bateson.
Yeah, Ed Bateson, District 1. Thanks, Bill. They want a double contingency on design.
Correct.
Does this mean they're going to want a double contingency on construction?
I don't know yet.
Okay, so because all we're paying for now is design. So if construction comes in at $3 million, what do we usually get? A 10% contingency? Now we'd be looking at 20?
There's a potential for that. I don't know. In the packet, there was an email, because I knew this is a little unorthodox, where even the state and their liaison admit, yes, this is a double contingency that the DOT has been doing as a means of adding extra funds to an agreement so that the need for later supplemental agreements is less likely, because then they have to go back to the Attorney General or the state DOT commissioner, I guess, which is harder.
Okay,
So.
I get it, and I appreciate the tone of your emails here and going back and forth and questioning them.
Mm-hmm.
But this, when this comes back, if they want if they want 20% contingency on construction, the first selectman's got to be pounding on his desk that ain't going to happen. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Again, maybe it has something to do with the percentages on the amounts or something
To do
like
with the
that.
fact they're broke. That's
Well,
what that
yeah.
has to do with.
I tell you what I'll do, though, Ed. You bring up a good point, and as we go through this process, and when the next time I do talk to the DOT, I'll find out what they're doing with the construction agreements.
And that's fine, Bill. I think you did a great job with your emails, but louder and harder. That's what you got to do. Thank you.
Sure, will do.
Further discussion? Seeing none? Thanks, Bill.
Sure, thank you.
Next, we have the telephone system bond resolution.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Burns, the Director of Information Technology for the Board of Education. This is David Kelly, who's Director of IT for the Town of Fairfield. Thank you for having us this evening. We're here to ask for funding for a short-term bond to help pay for a new phone system for both the town and the Board of Education. Honestly, I've been asking for this since 2004. I think I've been really patient. At this point, we've gone through an RFP process and a bid over almost a 2-year period. We were very comprehensive and open-ended in our look for a new system. The current system is approximately, I think, is 23 years old. The company that supports that system and manufactured it went bankrupt in 2009, so we've got an extra decade out of it. We're getting to the point where finding refurbished or continual parts is becoming an issue. We also have no capacity to take advantage of what we would consider features and functions that we've all become accustomed to. Caller ID comes to mind. A way to know that you have a message waiting. The ability to put voicemail into email so you don't have to call in to find out if you have a message and miss something important. All those things that help all of us who work for the town become more productive and efficient. In the process of going through the RFP, we looked at hybrid systems, we looked at off-site or hosted systems, we looked at internal systems. We settled on a, I should say settled, we agreed upon a solution from Cisco Systems provided by Total Communications. Total has done a number of these installations in other municipalities and boards of education across the state. They're well known and well appreciated. The installations went very well. And one of the largest reasons that David can go into in greater depth is the survivability factor of this. If our network goes down, if we have some kind of internal trauma on the lines or the network across the town due to a car accident or trees and tornadoes and oh my, there is a survivability factor built in so that every site will be able to still communicate. Obviously on a smaller scale than normal, but they will be able to communicate. So the bond request in front of you is about $867,000. That includes the actual quote for the project is $615,495 if I get my glasses on, and the remaining balance is to cover things like integrating with the police and fire systems, the school intercom systems, unknown contingencies, some minor cabling that we think may be necessary. With that, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you said it all.
Okay. So we open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members of the body? Representative Lefkowitz.
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. Did you happen to, in your research, look at what the town of Westport is doing? And if yes, is it a similar system? And do you have the ability, do these systems have the ability to talk to each other, if you will? Like, because I know that, like, the police department works in concert with each other and like, for alerts and that kind of thing.
Well, our networks are separate. The wide area network that we're using is the network that we built for the town, 10, 12 years ago. That's the network that we're using. Do they communicate with each other? Yes, as a phone system. Our wide area network is only connected to Westport through the Connecticut Education Network and the Nutmeg networks. So from a statewide perspective, I guess you could say theoretically they're connected, but we didn't work with them, on this project at all. I do believe, if I recall correctly, their system is something similar to what we've purchased or are purchasing.
Further questions? Representative Siebert.
Thank you, moderator. Joe Siebert, District 5. With this Cisco system, are you able to leverage their unified communications collaboration tools? And can you use those tools to collaborate outside of your realm with the likes of Westport? Or
Yes, we can use their collaboration tools, their call-in systems, group calling, video calling, all sorts of those unified communication solutions, as you've mentioned, with anybody really across the planet.
Great, thank you.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. This item, I believe, I've seen kicking around on the capital non-recurring whatever spreadsheet. Is this number similar to what was on there? I haven't had a chance to revisit it.
In the spreadsheet you're talking about, it was estimated at 1.5 million.
1.5?
And we're coming in at 886.
And is there a reason that this wasn't on the
67.
January agenda for the cap non-recurring? We just didn't have enough time, or usually we bond this stuff,
Oh, we weren't done with the process in time for that. That's correct.
Okay. So you had it down at 1.5. That was for combined BOE and town. Does the BOE carry anything in their budget for this? Did they have anything in their capital planning, or were they relying on the town to do this?
This was an overall town-based project.
Overall town project? Okay. And when you opened up your presentation, you said, I thought I heard short-term bond.
Well, we do expect this because there are portions of it that have a limited, the technology, so they don't last forever, as opposed to a traditional cable system like we have now with the phone system.
So when you went before the Board of Finance, sorry to interrupt, this however we bond this is going to be in compliance with their technology bonding.
Yes, we had a lengthy discussion with them about that.
It started out at 20 years, but we reduced it to 10.
So you're at
simply
10.
Because it's a technology.
And the Board of Finance signed off on that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but I know we've done a lot of investment in security, video streaming. Has the experts taken all that into consideration? I mean, is that how this is going to travel, or are we covered on all the technology requirements we have for security? Is that going to be traveling under this system, or is it something different? I just want to make sure.
They're all
Typically, when you
traveling-
do something like this, you're moving away from copper.
That's correct.
I just want to make sure that if we eliminate the copper, all of a sudden FPD turns around and says, hey, wait a second, guys, we needed that.
Well, actually, although the telephone traffic within town travels over the town networks and across the wide area network in town, but it's still basically a separate standalone telephone system. So
Will be?
So yeah, so it's not really, how do I say it? It's not part of security cameras or anything like that. It's a separate application running on the network.
Basically, think of it as the highway with separate lanes. That's what it boils down
That's fine.
to.
I just want to make sure that by us improving the phone system, we're not undoing something else.
No, we've looked at those capacities, and we've made some other adjustments to the networks. We also, as part of this process, went through a network readiness assessment to make sure that we weren't forgetting things like that. And
And that's
all
what the
those issues
consultant
were-
helped us with?
Yes.
Okay. Also, too, the only other concern I had was on your presentation, page 5. I'm sorry, what's your name, the new IT?
Dave Kelly.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hi.
You've, when you're talking about our town-wide systems backup, I see here on page 5 we have 3 things, and I see Sullivan Hall, Fire Station 1. Those are both in flood zones. Is that the old system or is that the new?
The Sullivan Hall location is going to get moved to the new data center on the second floor of the police station.
Okay.
Which we expect to have built and ready by then. It was chosen as Sullivan Hall because at that time the data center was not a thing yet.
Okay, so I just want to make, you seem to be a fan of getting this stuff out of flood zones? I assume...
I'm a fan of getting them out of basements in flood zones, yes. Yes. And what you see here is what Nancy alluded to at the beginning with the site survivability. We have what we call N+1 redundancy in the system. In order to support all of our call traffic on a typical day and to have backup capacity, we need 2 servers, which we would have in 2 locations, but we also have yet a 3rd location, and the information is replicated among these 3 locations so that if one of them does go out because the building is down, because the flood waters have come too high or something.
All right, so you're not going to object to if one of them's in a flood zone, the other 2 are above?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Representative Horton?
Horton, District 9. I just have a question about what would be the impact if we weren't to do this? You know, including kind of what type of costs are we going to start to see, you know, with a 23-year-old system as it continues to age if we don't do this?
What's kind of happening now is we're competing with third world countries for parts. When we buy a replacement telephone, we're getting a refurbished phone that is often spray painted black to cover the, you know, I mean, it's just that there's a declining inventory of spare parts to support this. It's not that our town phone system isn't really a single system, it's really a forest of multiple systems. Many buildings have pieces of the phone system in it. So it's not likely that the entire thing would collapse. It's just that there's a point where we may not be able to repair it for a couple of days. And if town hall was down for a couple of days, residents would notice. You know, it's kind of getting to that stage.
It also has limited capacity for expansion because, as Dave was saying, those little subgroups that are out there, I'll call them servers that are referred to really as KSU units. Those are hard to come by, and as many of our schools were maxed out with the number of handsets or lines that we can use at those schools. So for safety, security, we were talking about building projects earlier, we're really limited in what we can actually design to support the educational programs and the security of our students. So from the Board of Education's perspective, that's another issue and another reason why we need to go forward.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next, we have the amendments to the senior tax relief ordinance. We could ask, before we make Representative Vergara walk over to the table, does anyone have any questions for Representative Vergara? Do we have questions on the tax abatement ordinance? No. This is the Operation Hope abatement ordinance, okay. So we'll move to the safe discharge of firearms ordinance, and I'm going to join the presentation. So Representative McDermott will take over the mic.
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. The ordinance concerning the safe discharge of firearms within the town of Fairfield proposes to regulate the discharge of firearms in the town of Fairfield as a measure of additional protection of public peace and safety for Fairfield residents. This local ordinance, similar to, although in some cases less restrictive than ordinances that exist in surrounding towns such as Stamford, Greenwich, Trumbull, Darien, Norwalk, Westport, and Wilton, will allow the police department to have additional authority over an issue that is of increasing concern to Fairfield residents, namely non-hunting, non-crime-related gunfire. This is, by and large, already an issue subject to state regulation, and this ordinance aims to codify at the municipal level what is common sense. After months of research and careful review of state regulations, court decisions, local ordinances, and town codes, and with counsel from the town attorney and with full support of our chief of police, the RTM members sponsoring this ordinance determine language and parameters that are relevant to Fairfield residents and in the best interest of our public health and safety. As a newly elected RTM member and the Vice Chair of Public Health and Safety, I met with the department heads falling under the jurisdiction of this committee to better understand areas of need and where this body might be helpful in addressing issues of concern specific to our town. In thoughtful discussions with Gary McNamara, our Chief of Police brought up an issue that has been of concern to him since initial proposal was brought to his attention in 2012. Increasing frequency of complaints about the sound of gunfire in residential neighborhoods, as well as complaints that some residents had set up haphazard shooting ranges in their backyards, prompted members of the Public Health and Safety Committee and other members of this body to develop an ordinance that would help solve a specific problem for our police department. As recently as this weekend, I received written complaints from constituents that they heard gunfire at approximately 9:30 p.m. on Saturday evening emanating from a neighborhood home. I urged these residents to call the police department to log formal complaints, and they did that. Currently, there's nothing in our town code regulating the discharge of firearms. This ordinance would not supersede state gun laws. Rather, it gives additional authority to the police over the random discharge of firearms in town, as well as the supervision over any gun ranges set up on personal property, thereby adding a layer of security for all residents. Courts in Connecticut have ruled that statutes implicitly preempting, that they implicitly preempt municipalities from passing ordinances regulating firearm sales and hunting, but municipalities are allowed to pass ordinances to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of their citizens. And as such towns that I stated previously have ordinances concerning various other aspects of firearm use, such as discharge, regulations on range safety, gunfire noise, target practice, etc. So to that end, this ordinance was developed specifically for the town in consultation with the police department, and it does have the full support of the chief of police. There has been expressed support from members of both parties on the RTM. For additional clarity, there is no current state law that specifically prohibits a homeowner from discharging firearms on his or her property. And while state laws might apply in some instances, this ordinance adds a layer of desired jurisdiction for our police department. There is a way to get information on the state hunting laws, and that can be found on Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's website. But I do want to reiterate that this proposed ordinance does not supersede any of those laws, and legal hunting is not impacted by this ordinance. But this proposed ordinance does promote open dialogue between neighbors who choose to hunt or allow hunting on their private property. All residents who are hunting legally in accordance with state law under the new rules of this ordinance would be required to inform abutting neighbors annually of their intent to hunt or their intent to permit hunting on their property. Without alienating hunters, this allows all residents to make more informed decisions about when and where and how they let their children and pets roam freely in their backyard. The police department would have additional authority over random discharge of firearms, and by annually reviewing and with annual review by the chief of police or a designee, he would be able to deem a situation safe or otherwise for a shooting range on private property. As a body, we have an opportunity to potentially avoid tragic accidents from occurring here through preventative measures such as this ordinance. So in closing, I want to call out two people in particular, Fody Kaskinas, who's a resident of Fairfield, but he's also the chief of police in Westport, and I work closely with him and got his counsel, and also to Chief McNamara for working so closely on this ordinance and being a persistent and attentive to the safety and well-being of our community. He's not here tonight because he has a family obligation. He's happy to answer questions offline, or will be here next week to address any issues, questions, etc. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Representative Lefkowitz. Any questions from the body? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I just want to thank you for all your hard work and commitment and passion for this subject. I think it's a ordinance that we need. It's about time. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Herron.
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. How would it be communicated if this were passed to people who thought that they could discharge a weapon, like with the fine of, is it $250 per discharge? Would this be communicated? I don't know how it would be communicated to. I wouldn't want someone to think they were allowed to do it and then see that they have a fine of thousands of dollars because they were doing what they were previously doing. Does that make sense?
It does.
That's something that we've had discussions with the police department about, how the department would be involved in notifying residents about the change. It's certainly something that the department's willing to work with residents on. There doesn't necessarily have to be a fine the very first time.
It could be a warrant. It's at the discretion of.
The police don't necessarily have to fine the first time. I mean, that's possible. That happens on occasion with other violations of municipal ordinances. There obviously would be a learning curve because this is a different sort of thing. Certainly we would try to do press releases or other means to communicate this to the town.
Thank you.
Representative Hurley.
This is teamwork. Thank you so much. Michael Hurley, District 10. I think Representative Herron makes a very good point about notifying town residents about ordinances and changes to ordinances. I'm not sure that I know what the answer is, but I can say someone who has been involved in the creation of a number of ordinances and some very good ordinances, and this body has some very powerful, powerful rights to create such ordinances. It does seem as if there's a challenge getting this information out, and maybe we could, have the first selectman here for maybe the next meeting, just so that he could provide some perspective, not just on this ordinance, but on the other great ordinances that we've done, and how you get this information out, to the public. So, just a suggestion. Thank you.
Certainly a discussion we can have.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Section 3, subsection 5. I get the reason for this paragraph, but at the end, I'm tripping over all the legalese in the last sentence. And I just want to make sure that I'm not a lawyer, that we're not taking anything away from anybody here in the fact that it's got, the classic Conservation Commission of the Town of Fairfield provided, however, hunting is strictly prohibited on any other land, blah, blah, blah. It just seems it's a lot to read and a lot to digest. I just want to make sure that you're not taking away anything in that last paragraph, because there's a lot of words there. I mean, Phil, you're the lawyer. Did you read this, or did we lift this from? Did you write it, or did we lift it from somewhere else?
I was involved in writing it. The town attorney has reviewed it. He's comfortable with it. I'm not sure. Your question is, are we taking something away? I'm not sure what you mean.
It just. I don't know. I just get nervous when I see the lawyer start working with all these words here, provided, however. And it's, all this stuff is subject to interpretation. And I just want to make sure that you guys are happy with the fact that we're not touching anything. I don't see why we have to include all that down there. That's just me. The more you write, the more it's subject to interpretation. Like when you did with your notice, annual notice. Very vague. I kind of like it. But here, it's like you're starting to write this, and now it's like, okay, here we go.
I think
Just a suggestion maybe to visit it.
Representative Wackerman has a comment, maybe to help you, Ed.
I was also involved in drafting it, and I think it is a lot of words. I understand. It's true, it's kind of convoluted. But what our intention is, and I think this is what it says, is that the same rules apply about where you can hunt. You can hunt, the Conservation Commission has established open spaces and where you can hunt, and it's consistent with state law, and this won't change that. But you can't hunt on private land, on public beaches or parks. So it doesn't restrict hunting at all. It just clarifies that those same location rules apply.
It's also consistent with the language that conservation, and we've worked closely with conservation to make sure that it's consistent with their language as well. And we had to include that to be sure we weren't changing or trying to supersede hunting laws here, which are state hunting laws.
Can I go to Representative Wackerman's point here? I heard it. I got you. I just want to make sure that it sounds like you're saying when you start talking about land that is managed or under the supervision of the Conservation Commission, that land is also owned by the town of Fairfield. I just want to make sure that now you have the town of Fairfield owns the land, but yet it's being managed by the Conservation Commission. I see where you're going with that, but I just think you're opening up these things to interpretation or convolution. That's all.
Ed, I think the
I don't
purpose
know.
of that language is to make it clear the type of town land on which you can hunt, because presently the Conservation Commission could allow controlled hunts. They can, regulate hunting on open space land. But notwithstanding that, there's not going to be hunting in parks. I think it's just to ensure that there's a level of comfort that that's not.
Representative Varian's been very patient here, so.
I see Ed's point on this, and I think what Ed's saying is we're summarizing a lot of different laws here in a bunch of provisos at the end. Really, what I think you're saying is by any person hunting who is legally authorized to do so under laws, period. And so I do think the last 4 lines, starting with including open space land, blah, 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 to the end, public parks, or public beaches or parks can be deleted. It really is just confusing and extraneous language.
Yeah. What he said. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. So that we could do that.
It accomplishes what you wanted. So.
Yeah, I think it was added to add clarity, but
Right.
I think that your comments well taken.
All right, can I ask a question too, or do you want to go?
Certainly. Follow up.
Well, I guess a quick question too is, there are hunting laws about guns in my yard, right? I can't hunt in my yard unless I'm within X feet away from a house. 500 feet. Right, so was there any consideration, I know there was, we talked about it, but mirroring that kind of law versus a strict prohibition? Because the hunting, I'm allowed to hunt in my yard, but I have to stay away from houses.
Well, you're still under this. You're still allowed to do that.
Right, but I mean for recreational
shooting
discharge.
ranges.
Right.
So if we can ask Chief McNamara. Chief McNamara likes the idea of the Fairfield Police Department being able to inspect a shooting range that's in somebody's backyard and just make sure that it's safe.
But
So-
yes, the idea is you would be prohibited from going into your backyard and shooting.
But I could hunt in my backyard. I couldn't shoot it. So I guess my point is, right, I could shoot a deer in my yard, but I can't shoot a can in my yard.
As long as you are doing so legally and within the parameters of the law, you can hunt in your backyard.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. So that's why I guess I don't.
You can't shoot at cans, you can't target practice unless it's by the chief of police or a designee has come out and said, this is safe for a shooting range within these guidelines and parameters.
All right.
And the reason for that distinction is we're not looking to supersede anything that relates to hunting. We're not looking to take away anybody's rights to hunt.
No, I understand. I just meant, you know.
It provides.
Could it be less restrictive?
Yeah.
That's not this ordinance.
Gotcha.
Representative Wackerman, did you have a follow-up, or?
Just, yeah, back at that section we were talking about, I think Representative Varian's point is well taken. I like the proviso at the end, though, to kind of reinforce that hunting's prohibited on other land, so perhaps we can find a way to keep that in there and yet not make it too confusing and long.
I guess my only comment is, and again, now we're over-lawyering it, and that's kind of phrase.
You think?
Is that exactly the
How many
phrase-
lawyers are in the room tonight?
Right. Is that exactly the phrase of the statute? Otherwise, I don't want to paraphrase. That's my only comment.
Okay.
That should be a joke. How many lawyers does it take now? Representative Georgiadis.
Stay away from the
Drew
lawyers.
Georgiadis, District 9. I am not a lawyer, but I do live 3 blocks from the beach, and I like the clarity of the comment that includes beaches, because I often find shotgun shells down at the beach, and I can hear guns at my house that are being fired off the beach. Now, maybe they're out on the reef, and maybe they're not on the public beach, but I do find shotgun shells. So more clarity for location, for a couple words to me, I would support that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, that ends the open session, and we now move to our committee meetings. Thank you.